The sound of the cabin door slamming shut echoed like a verdict. The hiss of pressurized air filled the space, a signal that promised a journey of champagne and flat seats. But for one woman, it was not a promise of peace. It was the opening shot of a battle. The Boeing 787 of Etherish Air glowed in soft golden light. The business-class cabin, an oasis in the sky. Passengers sank into wide seats, flipped through glossy magazines, poured sparkling wine into crystal glasses. Everything exuded luxury, the kind of luxury that those who paid thousands believed would shield them from any form of injustice. But in seat 4B, a black woman sat calmly, knowing too well that sometimes the places gilded with gold revealed the ugliest shades of human nature. Dr. Nia Morgan, 39 years old, closed the worn pages of a theoretical physics magazine. Her eyes were steady, quiet, like the surface of a deep lake. Her neatly braided hair and navy blue pantsuit, simple yet refined, gave her the appearance of a professional, perhaps a lawyer, perhaps a professor. No one guessed she was the woman who had built Etherish Air from nothing. No one knew that the true owner of the airline was seated in the business cabin, blending in with the crowd. This was Nia's ritual. Once each quarter, she took a long-haul flight on her own airline. No founder suite, no real name revealed. She chose the plain alias N. Calder to test every detail herself, the temperature of a hot towel, the authenticity of a flight attendant's smile. She called them her ground truth flights, because the truth of an airline did not exist in reports, but in how they treated a nameless passenger. The boarding announcement rang out like the roll of a drum. Nia folded her book, lifted her leather case, and moved with the priority passengers. The gate agent scanned her ticket, smiled and said, "Have a pleasant flight, Miss Calder." The aircraft glistened like a golden box. Soft lights, leather seats still rich with new scent, trays of orange juice glimmering under LEDs. Nia took seat 4B, buckled her belt, and drew out noise, cancelling headphones. A quiet moment. A moment before the storm. And then it arrived. "Robert, for heaven's sake, watch the carry-on. Don't let it scrape the door frame. That's calf skin leather." The voice pierced the cabin like a blade. All heads turned to the aisle. A blonde woman appeared, 40, 2 years old, hair lacquered into a helmet, her body draped in logos of luxury brands. Victoria Hale entered as though the cabin itself were her private stage. Behind her, her husband, Ethan Hale, 40. 4, shoulders hunched and face red, struggled with 2 oversized, gleaming suitcases. "I'll take it, darling," he puffed, straining to hoist them into the overhead bin. "Don't wrinkle your suit. Leave it." "I won't look at a mess," Victoria replied coldly, then swept her gaze across the cabin. Her eyes cut like knives until they landed on seat 4A. "There, window seat. Mine." Her voice sliced the air. Her eyes locked on Nia. Just a second, but enough to reveal it all. Irritation, confusion, contempt. As if the calm black woman seated there were a crack ruining the golden cabin. Victoria stood blocking the aisle, clutching her purse to her chest. She did not sit. She did not greet. She only stared, her gaze a poisoned arrow aimed directly at Nia. Flight attendant Mia Torres, 28, approached with a professional smile. Good evening, ma'am. May I help you settle into your seat? Victoria turned, her tone dripping with disdain. You're sure this is the right seat? 4A. Mia checked the boarding pass, nodded. Yes, ma'am, the beautiful window seat. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Beautiful, Victoria muttered, lips curling into a sneer. Yet she stood still, unmoving. The aisle clogged. Passengers behind murmured impatiently. Naya lifted her gaze, offered a small, polite smile. Hello. I'm Naya, in 4B. Looks like we'll be neighbors for the flight. Victoria's reaction was a visible shiver, her lips pressed into a tight white line. She gave no reply. Instead, she muttered, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. There must be some mistake. I cannot sit here. Mia kept her tone calm. Your seat assignment is correct, ma'am. Is there a problem? Victoria lowered her voice, her eyes flicking to Naya like she was pouring venom. The seat is fine. The circumstances are not. I paid for a premium experience. This is not it. Passengers nearby began to hear every word. A man in 3D sighed heavily. Ethan Hale shifted awkwardly. Victoria, come on. Just sit down. Boarding's still in progress. But Victoria held firm. I did not spend this much money to sit next to someone like her. In that instant, the business cabin turned cold. The soft towels, the glasses of champagne, all of it became witnesses to a poison disguised as privilege. Prejudice wrapped in luxury. And Naya Morgan sat still, her hands resting neatly on her lap, her gaze steady and deep. She had seen this before, in conferences, in boardrooms filled with men who dismissed her. But this was different. This was happening inside her own creation, and she knew the real battle had just begun. The air in the business cabin grew thick. With every second, Victoria Hale remained planted in the aisle. The murmurs grew louder. Suitcases stopped rolling. Seatbelt clicks hung suspended in the gap. Everything was frozen by one venom-laced phrase. Someone like her. Flight attendant Maya Torres kept her smile, but the corners of her lips trembled slightly. In that instant, she knew this was not simply about a seat assignment. This was the true test of the dignity and flight policy the airline had trained for. Ma'am, I assure you, all business class seats meet the highest standards. If you would like champagne before takeoff, I'll prepare it right away. Victoria acted as if she hadn't heard. She turned to her husband, her voice sharp, deliberately loud enough for the entire cabin. Ethan, do you see this? What kind of ticket did you book that I'm stuck sitting like this? Fix it, now! Ethan Hale fumbled, his hands flushed red, crumpling the boarding pass in his grip. Sweat broke across his temple. He bowed his head low, as if the deeper he bent, the faster his wife's words might vanish into the air. Victoria, please just sit it down. Everyone's watching. She shoved his hand away. I will not sit. Do you hear me? I did not pay tens of thousands of dollars to be treated like this. Her eyes swept back to Naya. This time, no disguise, no veneer, pure, unfiltered contempt. Naya felt her chest tighten, not from the insult itself, but from the realization that even on the very airline she had spent 15 years building, there were still passengers who saw her presence as a mistake. She said nothing, not a word. Her hands remained folded neatly on her lap, and in that silence, Her response carried the greatest weight. Mia knew she could no longer handle this alone. She pressed the call button for cabin crew support, summoning the purser. Moments later, a tall figure with silvered hair approached. Omar Bennett, 50, veteran purser of Aetherus Air, appeared. His voice was low and steady, not raised, yet strong enough to halt the chaos in its tracks. "Good evening. I'm Omar, the purser for this flight. I hear you're having a problem with your seat." Victoria spun toward him, as if she had finally found a savior. "A problem? This is a disaster. I'm being forced to sit next to a passenger who makes me extremely uncomfortable. And your staff are completely useless." A silence fell heavier than any turbulence. Passengers lowered their newspapers, froze their tablets. Everyone waited to see how the man with salt and pepper hair would respond. Omar's eyes flicked to Naya. A small, subtle nod, a quiet message. "I understand. I'm here." Then he turned back to Victoria. "Ma'am," Omar said, voice calm but unyielding. "Aetherus Air has an absolute policy on safety and dignity. We do not and will not assign seats based on race, gender, or any personal characteristic. Seat 4A is yours, without exception." His words landed like a hammer. Victoria flushed crimson. You dare imply that I'm racist? You'll lose your job for this. I'll make sure of it. Ethan, say something." Ethan hunched, his voice trembling. "Maybe, Omar, if there's an empty seat, perhaps just move my wife to another section. Anything to—" But Omar cut him off instantly. "Sir, doing so would mean acknowledging that the passenger in 4B, who has done absolutely nothing wrong, is the cause of this disruption. That would be in direct violation of our principles. I cannot, and I will not do that." The cabin held its breath. His words were not just policy. They were an oath. Victoria scoffed, as if she'd just heard the most ridiculous thing in the world. "Absurd. You'd side with her over me? Do you know who my husband is? Ethan Hale, Vice President of Novatech Logistics. We have million-dollar contracts with your airline. Your CEO will certainly care about this." This was her trump card, the ace of those who believed money bent every rule. Victoria stood with arms crossed, certain that invoking that name would make the entire cabin bow. But in that moment, the only person smiling was Naya. Because Victoria had no idea that the CEO she was threatening was sitting less than an arm's length away, quietly witnessing it all. Inside Naya, a wave rose, not the rash fury of outrage, but a steady power, waiting for the right moment to erupt. She had designed her system to test itself, and right now, the system was holding. Omar did not flinch. Mia did not retreat. The cabin was leaning toward the truth. Only Victoria still did not see it. And Ethan? His eyes were hollow, as if he already knew. His wife's words had dug a pit not just for her, but for his own career as well. In seat 3D, a man shook his head, exhaling hard. A single sigh, but enough to paint the whole picture, weary, disgusted, and ready to speak if needed. At that moment, Naya understood. This was no longer about a personal insult. This was a full test of Aetheris Air's very soul. The storm door had opened, and the winds were only beginning to roar. The business cabin of the Aetheris flight was pinned down in silence. After every steel-edged word from purser Omar Bennett, Victoria Hale's arrogance had not subsided. Instead, it ignited hotter. Her eyes burned with fury, her voice rising sharply, deliberately loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. "You dare refuse me? I am a premium passenger. I paid for a first-class experience, and now I have to sit next to her?" Every gaze turned toward seats 4A and 4B. Some passengers stole cautious glances at Naya Morgan, the black woman sitting motionless like stone, her eyes calm, her hands folded neatly on her lap. That silence, rather than weakness, only exposed the indecency of Victoria's words. Ethan Hale sat frozen. The man freshly appointed as Novatech's vice president of European logistics carried none of the power his title suggested. His head hung low, shoulders trembling, hands clenched as if holding on to the last threads of control. But each word from his wife drove another nail into the coffin of his career. Purser Omar's voice remained steady. "Ma'am, Aetheris policy is clear. We do not assign or change seating based on any personal characteristics. Seat 4A is yours. Please settle in so the flight may depart." Victoria scoffed, her laugh dripping with contempt and challenge. "Do you think I don't know the law? I have the right to demand proper service, and I demand another seat. If not, I will make sure every one of you is disciplined. Ethan, say something," Ethan muttered meekly, his voice barely audible. "Maybe if there's a seat free in the back, just move Victoria then." "No." Omar's voice cut through, dropping low like a gavel. "If I move you, that would mean acknowledging that passenger 4B, who has done nothing wrong, is the problem. That is false. The only problem here is your refusal to comply. Mrs. Hale." A murmur rippled through the cabin. The man in 3D exhaled sharply, leaning forward to look directly at Victoria. Another passenger behind shook their head, muttering shameful. The atmosphere grew heavier, as if the aircraft had already taken a storm aboard before leaving the ground. Still, Victoria would not yield. Arms crossed, she spat each word like venom. "Do you even know who my husband is? Ethan Hale, Vice President of Novatech Logistics. Novatech pours millions into your airline every year. I will call your CEO right now. We'll see who truly holds the power." It was her final card, the ultimate threat: money and corporate influence. But in the business cabin, many only sighed. They knew this was not power, only borrowed prestige, masquerading as strength. Naya remained still. Her eyes lowered slightly. She drew in a deep breath. Each word from Victoria pierced like thorns into old memories. The times she had been dismissed at engineering conferences, the times she had been sidelined for being a woman of color, but she had learned not to answer with reckless rage. Instead, she let the system she had built speak for itself. Omar scanned the cabin and knew it could not go on. He strode to the interphone, pressing the button to the cockpit. His voice was low, but clear. "Captain, we have a code Bravo in business. Passenger refusal escalating to severe disruption." The phrase "Code Bravo" fell over the cabin like a bell tolling. Some passengers understood instantly. It was the internal code for a disruptive passenger requiring captain intervention. Eyes shifted to the cockpit door. Minutes later, a sharp click echoed. The cockpit door swung open. Captain Grant Reynolds, tall and broad, shouldered, with salt and pepper hair, stepped out in full uniform. He did not rush. He did not shout. He moved with measured calm, eyes cutting through the cabin like blades. Silence engulfed everything. The tension stretched tight as a string pulled to breaking point. Omar approached quickly, giving a concise report. Grant listened, nodded, then turned to face Victoria Hale directly. His voice was not raised, but it cut with chilling precision. "Ma'am, I am Captain Grant Reynolds. I have been informed you are refusing to comply with crew instructions. Is that correct?" Victoria lifted her chin, grasping at her chance to salvage control. "Finally, someone with authority. Captain, thank God. Your staff refused a simple request. I just want to change seats so I don't have to sit next to this person." Grant's gaze shifted to Naya, then back to Victoria. His voice was calm, deliberate. "Your request is to change seats because you do not want to sit beside passenger 4B. Is that correct?" Victoria nodded, triumphant. "Exactly. I don't feel comfortable." Grant's face hardened to stone. He spoke slowly, each word heavy as iron. "On this aircraft, the only discomfort we acknowledge is when safety is at risk. And right now, you are the risk. You have two choices. 1. Sit down in your assigned seat and remain silent for the duration of this flight. 2. Leave this aircraft immediately. You have 10 seconds to decide." The cabin froze. Whispers died. Every eye locked on Victoria, waiting to see if arrogance or reason would win. Ethan bowed his head, whispering desperately, "Victoria, please, just sit. Don't make this worse." But Victoria heard something else. To her, his plea was a blade slicing through her pride. No, she would not bow. She could not admit defeat in front of these watching eyes. She sprang up, her voice snapping like a whip. "Fine. I will leave this flight. I don't need to stay, and I promise you, Etheris will regret this." Grant did not blink. He nodded once, issuing his command crisply. "As you wish. Omar, notify ground. 2 passengers voluntarily deplaning." The murmurs swelled. Some passengers laughed in disbelief, and Victoria, in that single moment, began to feel the ground vanish beneath her. This was not the performance she had imagined. No one begged. No one bowed. And in that deadly silence, Naya Morgan sat steady, eyes fixed, calm yet unyielding. The storm had reached its breaking point. The entire business cabin held its breath. Captain Grant Reynolds' ultimatum hung in the air like a sharpened blade. Sit down immediately, or leave the aircraft within 10 seconds. Victoria Hale froze. Her red, painted lips trembled, then curved into a disdainful smile. She turned to her husband, her voice sharp with bitterness. "Do you see, Ethan? They are choosing her over me. A premium customer, the wife of a Novatech vice president. Ridiculous." Ethan lowered his head, his hands clenched white. He knew every word his wife uttered was a slash into the fragile rope of the career he had worked so hard to build. Grant Reynolds stood firm, his gaze forged in steel. He had flown thousands of hours, faced every kind of mechanical failure and storm. But what stood before him now was different. Not turbulence in the sky, but rebellion in the human heart. "Ma'am." His voice was deep and steady. No need to shout, but enough to shred any illusion. "The only comfort at risk here is the one your behavior has destroyed. This is my aircraft. The final decision has been made." Silence fell. Then Victoria lifted her chin, flinging her words like a gauntlet. "Fine. I will leave this flight. I will not endure this insult. We will take our money elsewhere. Ethan, get the luggage." The cabin rippled as if jolted by turbulence. Not because of her words, but because of the audacity dripping from them. As if she still believed the airline would beg her to stay, upgrade her, lay a red carpet at her feet. But Captain Grant only nodded coldly. "As you wish. David, notify ground. Prepare for 2 passengers to deplane." In that instant, Victoria's smug smile faltered, replaced by the first flicker of fear. This was not the script she had imagined. No one begged. No one lowered themselves. They truly meant to let her go. "Wait!" Ethan's voice cracked in desperation. "Please, sir. My wife. She was only upset. I apologize. Please let us stay. We have the Worthington dinner tonight. This flight is crucial." Grant did not move, his face unflinching. "Mr. Hale, she made her choice, and that choice is final. This is no longer about her alone. This is about the safety and dignity of the other 248 passengers on board." Mia and Omar stood beside him, their faces tight with tension, but unwavering. The cabin was so silent that the click of a seatbelt locking echoed clearly. Victoria lashed out one last time, her voice low and venomous, like a snake's hiss. "You. Yes, you. I don't know who you think you are, but I swear you will regret this. People like you don't belong here. That ticket, you probably got it from some charity program." The air froze solid. That one line, naked, vicious, fell into the cabin and buried what little dignity Victoria had left. Ethan buried his face in his hands, unable to look up, and it was at that moment that Naya Morgan rose. The soft snap of her seatbelt unlocking rang out, but it carried the weight of a war drum. The woman who had sat silent from the beginning, the woman Victoria had dismissed as a mistake in a gilded cabin, now stood with a presence that shifted the air. Naya was not tall, but her stance was straight as steel. Her eyes moved to Mia, to Omar, to Captain Grant, a slow, deliberate nod. "You handled this exactly right. Calm, precise, steadfast." Her words carried just enough volume for every seat in the cabin to hear. Clear, unshaken. Then Naya turned, her gaze locking on Victoria. It was not anger, nor hatred, but cold clarity, a mirror reflecting the truth. "You asked who I think I am. Very well. I will answer." The silence was absolute. Everyone waited. I am Dr. Naya Morgan. I was the lead propulsion engineer for the Mars exploration program. And I am the founder, the owner, and the CEO of Aetheris Air." Gasps surged through the cabin. Mia's eyes widened. Omar froze. Captain Grant gave a slight nod, affirming to the passengers that every word was true. Victoria staggered, her face draining pale as marble. What she thought was a petty quarrel with someone had revealed itself as her public self, destruction, played out before the very owner of the airline. Naya took one step forward, her voice lowering to a chilling finality. "You are not being removed from a plane. You are being removed from my property. Permanently." The last words rang like a verdict. No escape, no retreat. Victoria's mouth opened, but no sound came. Ethan remained a hollow figure, crushed beneath the collapse of his world. And the other passengers? Applause began softly from seat 3D, then spread quickly, swelling into a wave. A cabin of champagne and fine linen had become a courtroom of justice. And for the first time in her life, Victoria Hale had no stage to walk off. Applause rolled through the business cabin like a wave, spreading quickly into the rows of economy behind. It was not applause for entertainment. It was applause for release from the toxic air that had hung over the cabin for the past half hour. Victoria Hale stood frozen in the aisle, her face flushed red, then drained pale. Eyes bore into her from every direction, no longer looks of admiration for her designer handbag or branded dress, but looks of judgment and disdain. She had never known what it meant not to be the center of attention, and now she had made herself the object of ridicule in front of everyone. Ethan Hale kept his head bowed, his trembling hands tugging down their luggage. He dared not look at anyone, least of all at the black woman who had risen like a mountain before his wife. Every movement was slow, heavy, as though each step added another stone to his neck. Captain Grant Reynolds turned to Omar, his voice firm. "Purser, have ground, send support. 2 passengers will deplane immediately." Omar nodded, his voice carrying the weight of a verdict. "Yes, Captain. I will escort them to the door." Victoria tossed her hair, trying to salvage the last shred of pride. "You will regret this. I will call your CEO the moment I touch the ground." "I will." But before she could finish her threat, Naya Morgan stepped forward, her voice calm and heavy with authority. "No need. The CEO is standing right here, and I have just issued a lifetime ban for you both." Murmurs erupted. Victoria froze, the words slicing through her illusions. Ethan's shoulders collapsed, his heart pounding with the realization that his career might disintegrate because of his wife's recklessness and his own silence. 2 airport security officers entered, composed and efficient. They did not argue. They simply approached, firm yet polite, and motioned for the Hales to leave the cabin. Victoria lashed out. "Don't touch me. I don't need anyone to escort me." But her faltering steps and twisted face betrayed the truth. She no longer held any power here. The cabin watched in silence, and as the 2 figures disappeared through door 1L, another wave of applause broke out. Naya returned to her seat in 4B. She buckled her belt, picked up her physics journal as if it had only been closed for a few minutes. But the eyes of the passengers had shifted, They no longer looked at her as a stranger. They looked at her as a landmark, a symbol. She smiled faintly and turned to Omar. "Mr. Bennett, ensure every passenger in this cabin receives complimentary bar service for the rest of the flight, and credit each of them 25,000 miles. Offer my apology for the delay." Omar stood straighter, like a soldier receiving command. "Yes, Dr. Morgan." Mia Torres, her eyes misting with emotion, nodded quickly, her voice trembling. "Thank you. No, thank you, CEO. It is an honor to serve you today." Nayar met her gaze, soft but firm. "You don't need to thank me. You did the right thing. You upheld the values of Etheris. That is what I am proud of." The cabin loosened, the suffocating tension lifted. Some passengers leaned across the aisle, raising their glasses toward Naya. The man in 3D, Daniel Price, a well-known lawyer, chuckled quietly, speaking just loud enough for those nearby to hear. "In 15 years flying this route, this is the first time I've seen the true definition of class." The engines began to roar. The aircraft eased back from the gate, golden light reflecting on the faces of the passengers. Their champagne glasses trembled slightly, but no longer from tension. This time, it matched the rhythm of unified hearts in a space that had just endured an explosion and emerged cleansed. Nayar drew in a quiet breath, her chest full. She knew today's test was not just about the crew's abilities. It had proven that the system she had built, from training protocols to company culture, could withstand the most poisonous storm. Yet deep inside, she also knew, this was only the beginning. Victoria had not only brought personal insult, she had wielded the name Novatech Logistics as a weapon. That meant the coming battle would not remain confined to an airplane cabin. It would spread to the glass towers where CEOs and boards negotiated multi-million-dollar contracts. And Nayar Morgan was ready. The engines roared as the 787 climbed into the night sky, leaving behind the 2 passengers expelled from the aircraft, like stones falling from a cliff. But for Nayar Morgan, the story was far from over. In truth, it had only just begun. As the business cabin settled back into quiet, passengers sipping complimentary champagne, Naya opened the slim laptop from her leather case. Her fingers struck the keys in steady rhythm, her eyes burning with a cold resolve forged over a lifetime of battles in unforgiving environments. She connected to high-speed satellite Wi-Fi. An email window opened. Recipient, Marcus Lee, Etheris's chief legal officer, a man of 40. 6, known as the company's Cold Blade. The subject line was typed quickly. Urgent. Incident on Flight 815, Novatech Logistics. Nayar drew a breath, then began to write. Marcus, please note, I personally witnessed a serious incident on Flight JFK, LHR. Passengers Victoria and Ethan Hale, traveling on Novatech Logistics' corporate account, engaged in racially motivated harassment, refused to comply with crew instructions, and delayed the flight by 45 minutes. Mrs. Hale repeatedly invoked Novatech's corporate contract with Etheris as a weapon, demanding that crew members remove another passenger, myself, from her rightful seat. She paused. A tightness rose in her throat, but she refused to let emotion bleed into the words. This was not to be an email of anger. This had to be a blade sharpened to icy precision. She continued, I have issued a permanent ban on both individuals across the entire Aetheris network and all partner carriers. Your task: draft an official notice to Novatech CEO Leonard Brooks, inform him of the incident, and ask if this is the standard of behavior Novatech permits its executives and family members to represent. Review all existing contracts with Novatech, valued at approximately $8 million annually. Prepare termination contingencies if necessary. Compile a complete file. Reports from Captain Grant Reynolds, Purser Omar Bennett, and Flight Attendant Mia Torres. All must be notarized. She typed the closing line. Marcus, remember, we do not punish to take revenge. We punish to teach. To remind the world that Aetheris will not sell its soul for a contract. Nya. She hit send. The soft whoosh sounded like the ignition of a missile. From a plush business cabin, a cold arrow had just been loosed toward Novatech's glass and Steel headquarters in Manhattan. While Nayar took a sip of water, on the other side of the ocean, Marcus Lee was already reading. It was 3 a.m. at his office, but Marcus was awake. He had long grown used to urgent midnight messages from his CEO. He opened the email, reading every line, the tension etching deeper into his already stern face. He understood. This was not merely about disruptive passengers. This was a direct strike against a corporate relationship. He immediately called Priya Shah, the company's director of corporate contracts, 40 years old. His gravelly voice carried urgency. Priya, I need figures now. Full spending history from Novatech with Aetheris for the past 5 years. Their travel manager's name, contract signatory, and most importantly, Ethan Hale's direct superior. Don't ask why. This is a CEO order. Priya snapped awake, diving into the system. Within an hour, Marcus had the report. Novatech spent nearly $8 million a year on air travel. The account tied directly to the department Ethan Hale had just been promoted to lead as Vice President of European Logistics. Marcus muttered, this trip was the celebration of his promotion. And now, he began drafting the letter to Novatech CEO Leonard Brooks. No accusations screamed in bold. No emotional appeals. Only fact. Cold, sharp. Mr. Brooks, we wish to formally inform you of an incident involving 2 passengers traveling under Novatech's corporate account. Their conduct included refusal to follow safety instructions, racially motivated harassment, and invoking your company's name as a weapon to intimidate Aetheris staff. This raises the question, is this the cultural standard Novatech accepts to be tied to its brand? Aetheris maintains a zero-tolerance policy, and we await your company's response. Marcus reread, nodded. The letter did not need volume. Its restraint was the danger, like a silenced gun. He pressed send. On the aircraft, Naya closed her eyes, leaning back in her seat. Beyond the window, silver bands of cloud stretched across the Atlantic night. Inside, she felt a heaviness mingled with certainty. Victoria Hale believed the battle ended when she was escorted off the plane. But Naya knew the storm had only just left the runway. This time, it would descend upon an entire corporation. She thought to herself, when someone wields their prejudice to demean others, they never understand that the consequences do not end with the individual. They spread, and they will learn that lesson in the hardest way possible. The 787 sliced forward into the night sky, bound for London. But on the ground, calls were being placed. Cold emails were firing. A new chessboard was being set. And the first piece had already been moved by Nia Morgan herself. The first light of dawn cut across Manhattan's glass towers as the email from Etheris Air landed squarely in the inbox of Leonard Brooks, the 62-year-old CEO of Novatech Logistics. The silver-haired man sat in his office on the 50th floor, a space as vast as a modern cathedral with soaring ceilings and walls of glass stretching from floor to ceiling. He opened the email and read every word in silence. His eyes, aged but sharp, darkened with each line. The message was not dramatic, not loud. It was a cold report, accompanied by notarized accounts from the captain, purser, and flight attendant. But its very coldness made Leonard's chest tighten. Novatech was in the middle of its multi-million-dollar diversity in motion campaign, plastered across billboards all over New York. And now, the wife of one of his vice presidents was being accused of racial harassment, and not against just anyone, but against the CEO of one of their largest partners. If this leaked, it could sink the entire pep edifice Leonard had so carefully built. He pressed the internal call button. 5 minutes later, 2 people entered. Carla Nguyen, the 48-year-old head of HR, and Edgar Mills, the company's chief legal counsel. Leonard wasted no time. He pushed the laptop toward them. "Read, and tell me what we are dealing with." Carla scanned through the email, her face gradually paling. Edgar sighed, removed his glasses, and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Dangerous. Very dangerous. Dr. Nia Morgan is not just a CEO. She's a technology icon, celebrated in the press. We cannot treat this as a minor clash. This is a public relations bomb. Leonard tapped his fingers against the glass table. Who exactly is involved? Carla slid over a printed file. Ethan Hale, recently promoted to Vice President of European Logistics. This was supposed to be his celebratory trip. He traveled with his wife, Victoria Hale. Leonard closed his eyes, shaking his head slightly. So a celebration has turned into a career funeral. Call them in. Boardroom. 10 o'clock. I want to hear it from their mouths. Meanwhile, in their gleaming Westchester mansion, the Hales sat in silence. Victoria was still railing, shouting that she had been humiliated, insisting the airline had fabricated the story to smear her. Ethan sat in a leather chair, staring blankly, twisting his wedding ring over and over. He did not dare speak. The phone rang. The screen lit up with the words, Carla Nguyen, HR Novatech. Ethan's chest tightened. He answered with a trembling hand. Mr. Hale. Carla's voice was flat and metallic. We require you and your wife at Novatech headquarters in Manhattan. Boardroom, 50th floor, 10 a.m. sharp. The CEO will see you directly. Do not be late. But Victoria doesn't work at Novatech, Ethan tried to salvage. Carla cut him off, her voice sharp as a blade. She invoked Novatech's name to threaten a partner. That makes it directly relevant. Both of you. 10 a.m. The line went dead, the sound like the slam of a prison door. At 9:55, the boardroom on the 50th floor gleamed with cold light. A polished wood table stretched across the room, high, backed leather chairs standing like sentinels. The air was thick with tension. Leonard Brooks sat at the head of the table, Carla to his right, Edgar to his left. Before them was a thick file, the cover stamped, "Incident Report, Flight 815. The door opened. The Hales entered. Victoria was still clad in her Chanel dress, hair sculpted stiff, lips painted crimson. She tried to carry herself with haughty poise, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. Ethan looked 10 years older than he had the night before. "Sit," Leonard said, his voice low and dangerous. Victoria jumped in first, desperate to seize control. "Mr. Brooks, I'm glad we finally have a chance to explain. What happened on that flight was blown out of proportion. Atheris staff treated us terribly, and a black woman sitting next to me." "Enough." Leonard cut her off. His hand struck the file with a dry crack that echoed through the room. "The black woman you refer to was Dr. Nia Morgan, the owner of Atheris Air, a scientific genius, a global figure. She sent this report directly to me, with signed confirmation from the captain, the purser, and the flight attendant. Every minute, every word, logged in detail." Victoria froze, her face stiffening like stone. Ethan shut his eyes, feeling the ground give way beneath him. Carla slid the printed report across the table. "This record states clearly, Mrs. Hale, that you invoked Novatech's name to intimidate Atheris staff. And you, Mr. Hale, remained silent, which amounts to complicity. Do either of you have anything to say?" Ethan's voice trembled, barely audible. This was a misunderstanding. I only wanted to calm things down." "I never," Victoria cut in, her voice shrill. "This is fabrication. They humiliated us out of jealousy. We should be suing Atheris. Mr. Brooks, you need to protect your employees." Leonard shot to his feet. His eyes stormed into theirs, raw and merciless. "Protect my employees. You have destroyed an $8 million partnership. You have turned my Diversity in Motion campaign into a farce. You have insulted the very CEO of our partner. And now you want me to sue them. Victoria Hale, your stupidity and arrogance have surpassed all limits." He turned to Ethan, his voice as cold as a guillotine. "Ethan Hale, your position as vice president ends immediately. Your termination will read, 'Terminated for cause.' You have exactly 5 minutes to leave this building with your wife. Security is waiting outside the door." Silence swallowed the room. Ethan sat frozen, eyes clouded, a man watching his life collapse in real time. Victoria's mouth opened, but no words came. Carla closed the file with a sharp snap. Her voice was ice. "This meeting is over. Please leave." The door swung open, and with it, the Hales' careers, reputations, and borrowed glory plunged into the abyss. The boardroom door closed behind the Hales like the stroke of a blade, stripping away the last remnants of the false grandeur they had clung to. An hour later, as the company car carried them away from headquarters, Ethan Hale sat motionless, his face ashen. The termination notice, stamped "Terminated for cause," trembled in his hand, every word etched into his mind like knives. Victoria could not comprehend it. Throughout the entire ride, she repeated herself like a broken machine. "We'll sue them. There will be lawyers on our side. They can't do this to us. I'll prove." "Stop!" Ethan cut her off, his voice hoarse, low and dangerous. For the first time in his life, the man who had always bowed to his wife's fury unleashed 2 words heavy as stone. Victoria turned sharply toward him, stunned. She had never seen her husband's eyes so hollow, as if something inside had died. In the days that followed, the tide dragged them under faster than any storm Ethan had ever accounted for in his logistics plans. At the country club, where Victoria once strutted in crisp white tennis skirts with a triumphant smile, the name Hale became a whisper in the halls. Her practice slots were suddenly double booked, lunch tables mysteriously reserved. Polite nods turned into awkward smiles and eyes that avoided hers. Once a powerful Mrs. Hale, she had become the butt of whispered jokes. Ethan faced the collapse even more directly. In the corporate world, terminated for cause was a death sentence. Job applications went unanswered. Calls to old friends ended in empty promises and silence. During one video interview, the HR manager's expression shifted as her eyes caught an article about Flight 815 that had gone viral. Minutes later, the call ended with a curt, "We'll be in touch." They never were. Money bled away quickly. The sprawling Westchester estate became a weight they could no longer bear. Each bill was another nail hammered into the coffin of their gilded dream. When the for sale sign was planted on the manicured lawn, Victoria stood at the window, watching strangers wander through the house, inspecting every room, every piece of furniture she had once flaunted with pride. The shame was like being stripped bare in a crowded street. Eventually, they moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in a mid-tier complex. Beige-painted walls, windows overlooking a grey parking lot. Victoria could not stand the mediocrity. Night after night, she unleashed her rage on Ethan. "You should have protected me. You should have shouted at those flight attendants, forced them to do what I said." Ethan sat silent before the mountain of final notice envelopes until months of smouldering anger erupted on one storm-drenched night. He slammed the table, his eyes bloodshot. "Protect you? From what? From the consequences of the vile contempt you threw at another human being? I stayed silent while you humiliated an innocent woman, only because of the color of her skin. That was my mistake. My mistake was letting you drag our lives into the abyss." Victoria froze, lips trembling, unable to speak. In that moment, she saw the harsh truth. The world hadn't turned against them. She had slammed every door shut herself. From that day, the marriage, once patched together with money and status, split open completely. They lived under the same roof like strangers, divided by a silence heavier than walls. A year later, the separation papers were signed quietly. Ethan moved to Ohio, taking a middle management role at a regional trucking company. From international vice president to freight supervisor, he looked at himself in the mirror each morning and saw a ghost. Victoria stayed in New York, clinging to scraps of pride, landing a job behind the cosmetics counter of a department store. Every day, she bent to spray perfume samples, serving women who had once shared the same business-class cabin as her. Their polite eyes carried an unmistakable shadow of mockery. While the lives of the Hales plunged into freefall, the story of Flight 815 grew into a symbol. Daniel Price, the lawyer from Seat 3D, published a post on LinkedIn that spread like wildfire. I have flown hundreds of flights, sat in hundreds of business-class seats, but for the first time, I witnessed the true definition of class. It was not champagne or high-thread count sheets. Class is when an airline defends human dignity, no matter the ticket price. And today, I saw that on Etheriss Air. His words became a spark. The media amplified it. Business schools dissected it as a case study. Rival corporations, watching closely, approached Etheriss with offers. We want to fly with an airline that has a soul. While the name Hale faded into oblivion, the name Naya Morgan was etched deeper than ever. 3 months after the incident on Flight 8115, the name Etheriss Air appeared across the covers of global business magazines. No longer were the stories dry reports about profit or market share. Instead, they blazed with headlines praising the airline that put human dignity above profit. The $8 million contract with Novatech Logistics had been cut like a frayed string. But that was only the beginning. A week later, Novatech's biggest competitor announced an exclusive partnership with Etheriss worth over $30 million. Their explanation was simple. We want to fly with a company that has a soul. The Etheriss offices were flooded with congratulatory flowers. On social media, the hashtag #dignity. In-flight spread like wildfire, attached to countless stories about justice and human worth. To passengers, Etheriss was no longer just an airline. It had become a cultural symbol. In London, beneath the golden chandeliers of Claridge's Hotel, the Airline of the Year ceremony unfolded. More than 1,000 guests, from corporate leaders to international media, turned their eyes toward the radiant stage. When the host declared, "This year's award goes to Etheriss Air, honored for setting a new standard of respect and dignity in global aviation," the entire hall rose in thunderous applause. The ovation rolled on like a torrential rain beating against glass. Dr. Naya Morgan stepped forward, her hair braided neatly, her eyes calm yet proud. Sitting in the front row were Captain Grant Reynolds, Omar Bennett, and Mia Torres. The three who had borne witness and upheld the standard on Flight 815 were now seen by the world as silent heroes. Naya placed her hand on the podium and gazed across the vast hall. Her voice rang out, not loud, but resonant like a bronze bell. An airplane is a wonder of humanity. Hundreds of thousands of parts working together, defying gravity, to take us where we need to go. But it is not only machines that must work in harmony. There is something more important. People. Trust. The room fell into complete silence. The pilot must trust the engineer. The crew must trust the captain. The passenger must trust them all. And that bond of trust breaks the moment anyone dares to diminish the dignity of another person because of skin color, gender, or background. She paused, her eyes sweeping over the crowd like a spotlight. We believe an airline does not merely carry people from point A to point B. Our mission is to carry them with safety, respect, and dignity. That is not an extra service. That is our core promise. That is the soul of Etheriss Air. Her final words echoed, and then the hall erupted. The applause was deafening. Voices cheering louder than the music. In the front row, Mia Torres's eyes brimmed with tears. Omar Bennett clenched his hands, his face stoic, but his eyes glistening. Captain Grant, always stern in the cockpit, allowed himself a rare smile, his gaze filled with pride. Naya looked toward them, nodded slowly, and in the flurry of flashing cameras, she understood. This was not just her award. It was confirmation that the culture she had built, the one that held firm through the storm of Flight 814, had now become the golden standard for an industry. Meanwhile, the Hales lived in a world of complete contrast. In a cramped apartment, dim yellow lights cast shadows on cracked walls. Victoria now stood behind a cosmetics counter, forcing a smile as she handed powders to customers. Ethan toiled in a trucking warehouse in Ohio, every truck horn a harsh reminder that he had fallen from vice president to shift supervisor in a matter of months. On the small television in their apartment, news of the Airline of the Year ceremony played on repeat. When Nia Morgan's name appeared, Victoria snapped the screen off in rage. But Ethan did not. He stared into the blank screen, and deep in his eyes there was a bitter recognition. This was justice. In London, Nia stepped down from the podium as the standing ovation thundered. The award gleamed in her hand, but what shone brighter was the message she had planted in thousands of hearts. True power does not lie in wealth or titles. True power is the ability to stand up and defend dignity when it is under attack, for yourself and for others. As the lights of the London Hall dimmed, Nia Morgan sat alone near the stage. The Airline of the Year award rested on the table, gleaming like a small star. But in her eyes, there was more than pride. There was the quiet reflection of someone who had witnessed the full circle of justice unfold. In that still moment, memories of Flight 815 came flooding back. Victoria's hateful glare, Ethan's trembling hands, the suffocating tension inside the cabin as words of prejudice sliced through the air like blades. And then the final applause, the sound that transformed humiliation into triumph. She knew it had never ended with their removal from the plane. That had only been the beginning of a long chain of consequences. Across the ocean, those consequences were eroding lives piece by piece. Victoria Hale, once proud in grand halls, now stood under the cold neon lights of a cosmetics counter, painting on lipstick. Every forced smile, every polite sales pitch was a shard of glass cutting into the pride that had once swelled so arrogantly. The woman who had shouted in business class that she deserved special treatment now had to say to customers, "This shade would look beautiful on your skin." Ethan Hale, once a global vice president, now hunched over spreadsheets in a Midwest logistics office. His world was trucks, shipping containers, and a salary barely covering rent. Each time a colleague accidentally turned on a business channel mentioning etherish air, his chest clenched tight, because he knew his downfall had not come from a bad deal or a wrong calculation. It had come from his silence in the moment he should have said, "Enough." Their fractured marriage finally crumbled into ash. One winter night in the cramped apartment, Ethan whispered his last words to her. "Victoria, I lost my career because of you. But what truly killed us was the empty pride you clung to." The next day, divorce papers were signed. They had lost everything: jobs, reputations, Even the friends who once fawned over them at dinner tables now disappeared without a trace. Just as Naya had once thought on that flight, prejudice is baggage too heavy to carry, and one day life will force you to check it in at a cost you cannot imagine. In stark contrast, Aetherus Air soared like a phoenix after the storm. New deals with multinational corporations quadrupled revenue. The hashtag dignity in flight became a global training motto. And Naya, though she still took ground, truth flights under the name N. Calder was no longer hidden. She had become the living embodiment of a philosophy. Class is not measured by money, but by how you treat others. 1 year later, at the 20th anniversary of Aetherus, Naya stepped onto the stage before thousands of employees and guests. On the massive LED screen behind her, the words shone bright. "Decency is the standard." She began slowly, her voice steady, intimate, like a confession. "There was a time when I was told, to my face, that I did not belong in a premium cabin, that my presence was a mistake. But that day, I saw my team stand up and defend the truth, and I understood an airline is not defined by seats or meals, but by the way it treats people." She lifted her head, her voice rising strong and resonant, like the engines of a jet taking flight. "We chose the harder path, never compromising, never bowing to arrogance or prejudice. And because of that, we prove to the world that true power does not lie in bank accounts or titles. It lies in the resolve to protect dignity for yourself and for others." The applause burst forth, long and unending. Some employees wept, because they knew they worked not for a company that just sold tickets, but for one that sold trust. Naya's gaze drifted to the front row, where Captain Grant Reynolds, Omar Bennett, and Mia Torres sat. They smiled, their eyes radiant with pride. She nodded softly, a silent "thank you." The story of Flight 815 became legend in the industry. And the name Hale, it vanished from conversations, surviving only as a cautionary tale in textbooks. Never use arrogance to challenge a system built on dignity. High above the skies, every time an Aetherus 787 cut through the clouds, Naya Morgan knew she had not just built an airline. She had built a small world where justice did not need to shout, but resonated through every calm decision. And the final lesson of that flight, one she always told new employees: the world is smaller than you think. The person you look down on today may be the one who owns the sky you stand in tomorrow. The story of Flight 815 reminds us that true power does not lie in titles or wealth, but in how you defend dignity, for yourself and for others. If you believe that justice is always worth speaking up for, hit like, subscribe to continue with the stories ahead, and leave a comment with the words "True Power."